Welcome to Rock Docs Live, our first live one. This is a podcast about music documentaries. I'm David Lizabram here with my co-host
Andrew Keats, and I'm really appreciative, David, that you snuck in a fish reference there about a live one. That is very nice of you. Thank you.
Oh God, this is Andy's driven us off the rails already. Okay, we are here. We're just really thrilled to be here with some of the creative minds behind one of our all-time favorite music documentaries, and certainly one of the most acclaimed and beloved, 2004's Dig. We're here with Ondi Timoner, the director, and her brother and producing partner, David Timoner. Say hi.
Hello.
So this the movie, we reviewed it on our podcast. Most people who have the slightest interest in music documentaries are obviously familiar with Dig. It was an award winner. It featured two kind of up and coming bands at the time, Jonestown Massacre, and being the kind of sort of more controversial of the of the two. And we just really wanted to get into kind of the backstory and where you're at now looking at the movie 20 years later. So I probably didn't mention the Dandy Warhols, did I? Okay. So it features the Jonestown Massacre and the Dandy Warhols. Let's get into it. Andy, fire away.
Yeah. So first question I wanted to ask is, and I think it's also a creative choice, an interesting creative choice that this isn't in here, but what is the sort of the backstory about your level of access and the intimacy of your access that allowed you to have this, 2,500 hours of footage over years with these two bands? What was sort of your relationship with the bands, before you started putting cameras in their faces in their most intimate moments for years and years in the rise to fame? Another documentary may have told that story as part of the movie. You guys, noticeably didn't. So maybe you could let us behind the curtain there. How did this project come about?
Should I start?
Go for it. Yeah, Ondi, how are you?
Hi. So the movie opens with basically starts at the very beginning, and you see me meet Anton in that moment. And so we had faces from on his birthday. And our sister was our older sister was getting married or having a ceremony of a celebration of love, because gay people could not get married at that point legally. And it was 1996. It was August 29th. And we were in San Francisco. We had started making a film that was about sort of the collision of art and commerce. And it was called The Cut. And it was like, where art meets commerce, who will make the cut? And so we were looking at like 10 bands over a year was the idea, to look at bands on the verge of getting signed and what happens to them as they move into the commercial world. And I had heard the music of the Jonestown Massacre and thought it was some band from the 60s that I missed. And then my friend Denisa was like, oh, actually, no, they're alive and well, and they're in San Francisco. And so we got in touch with Anton, and he was very excited to meet a film crew, thrilled to meet a film crew. And he's like, oh my God, we're playing a gig that night, so you should come. So we drove up from, for the ceremony the next day, and just decided to swing by this gig. And they showed up late. They had
they'd been kicked off the bill because they were late.
Out of their car, and they the club wouldn't let them play anymore. So they were like, let's have a revolution on the sidewalk. And it was quite the standard fare.
Yeah, you got the full Anton on night one.
Yeah. It was really like it was a breath of fresh air, frankly, from the band.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing, because the LA bands were all just like very focused on getting signed and that very kind of commercial success. And the Jonestown was just like, they were doing it. First of all, the music was, pretty much better than everybody else. And
it was good.
So committed to this revolution. So it's very quickly, the movie just completely shifted, right? It went right from this like Hoop Dreams of Rock, which is how we were sort of pitching the other thing, into Jonestown, and then Anton introduces us to the Dandy Warhols, and that was that.
Yeah, but I think Anton told Courtney a fib. So,
did.
What was that? What was that fib?
Back to the chronology because it's really funny. That night, so they obviously couldn't perform on the sidewalk, so we went back to Dave Darazinski's house, the manager, and they were like, "That's when Anton's like, I'm a human earthworm, and I take all the shit and I turn it into fertilizer and beautiful things, and I'm the postman, and I'm sorry, they're the postman, I'm the letter writer, metaphor upon metaphor." We had no idea what drugs they were doing, but clearly they were doing lots of drugs. And then they started to play. And then the neighbors came over and it was like, it's 2 a.m. It was like this unbelievable scene with the neighbors.
Yeah.
And that was our night. And then they were like, you know what? We'll see you again. We're going to be down in a couple weeks to play the Viper Room for this, industry showcase for 5 different record labels. And we were like, that's great. That's perfect for our project. Why don't you come over? We'll come and do the sound check with you. And then you guys can come back and chill at our house. And that's so many of the scenes in the movie, like Matt Hollywood saying, you burn in hell for pretending to be God and not being able to back it up. Like that was that fight they had because Anton spent all their gas money on sitars. Mm-hmm. And that's why they got that fight at the Viper Room.
Yeah.
Dandies are still not in it at this point, but the very next day after that crazy fight where I'm like, what is that on your hands? And he's like, blood. And I'm like, from what? Faces. We go over to Greg Shaw's house from Bomb Records, and that's where they were all staying. And we go, and Anton's out at the park and everybody's terrified of him. And they're all trying to write up a contract for him to sign that he won't beat people up again. And then then he comes home and he's like, forget about those other bands, all those bands you were filming, like, forget about them. Like, I'm taking over your documentary. We're going to have a revolution. We're overthrowing everything in the music industry. Have you heard of the Dandy Warhols? And that's that part you see in the movie where he basically introduces us to the Dandy Warhols and declares that this is going to be the new movie. And I'm thinking, he just beat up his guitar player. Like, I'm not going to argue with him right now. I'm just going to roll with this for the time being. Little did I know he told Courtney in Portland that I was like a spin.
MTV. He said we were from MTV. Yeah. Because we arrived in Portland, they thought we were from MTV. And we're like, sure, okay. It was fun.
Because they had signed to Capitol and they were just finishing their first record. And that's where Courtney has, literally the first time we met him was like when he says, I sneeze and hits come out.
Right.
That's up to here. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's because their first try at that album had been rejected. So they were like, a little bit chastened by the whole, like, trying to, make a.
Did they admit that though? I don't think they admitted that to us.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that, but that's where that conversation came from. Like,
I see. Oh yeah.
Harry Watts Russell was like, I don't hear a hit here. And he's like, a hit, I sneeze and hits come out.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. Well, I was just gonna ask, can you situate us in the scene? I mean, you were talking about other bands you were looking at. Are any of those names that we would know, or did you just kind of stumble on gold?
Stu from the Negro Problem, he's kind of done some stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, the Negro Problem, the Dashboard Prophets.
Yeah, Chris Dye, they were great.
Yeah, I think he lives in Austin now. Yeah.
He lives outside Austin, yeah.
Yeah, really talented guy. We were super into his story, and we were going to do his story at one point with Mother Tongue. Now, Mother Tongue was a great band, and they broke up on camera in front. And so we ended up making our first music film ever was called Broken.
Yeah,
it was a 30-minute film about Mother Tongue. But anyway, there was them, Floricine, there was Touch Candy, there was Agnes Gooch.
Yeah.
That guy's talented. Matt Baker was the lead singer of Agnes Gooch, right?
I'm trying to remember the other bands. Oh god.
Nobody
nobody
really made it except for Negro Problem got some notoriety, but that's it.
There's definitely a remember some guys thing about old band names, when you're going back there. But I mean, was there any hard feelings or anything that did you tell them like, hey, remember we were making a documentary about you? Well, now we met the Brian Jonestown Massacre and the Dandy Warhols, so sorry.
Not that we. Oh wait, there was a woman, 2 women. There was a band, and I think
Yeah.
My fiance has actually like played with them since. They were successful after that. We have the name.
It wasn't the band. Oh God.
No. All right. Well, we can fact check this.
No, nobody was bitter with us. Certainly not as bitter as Anton was for us making him famous.
All right.
Nice segue. Yeah, that's good.
Well, so I was going to say, you say that the first project had a Hoop Dreams element to it, but I'd say Dig still retains a bit of a Hoop Dreams element. I mean, to the extent that you're sort of putting a flag and putting the camera on people who are not yet famous. Maybe the Dandies, they'd signed to Capitol, maybe they were on their way, but for the most part, this was pre-fame, and there's some risk there that you'll have thousands of hours of footage of people that no one wants to see. Luckily, that was not the case at all. How much of a conversation did you have about how speculative this decision was and whether these guys deserved this treatment?
That's a
sort of talent scouting, really.
That's a great question.
We were just swinging big. I feel like, I mean, maybe it's because I have kids right now who are like, and you do too, Ondi, who are like at that precipice of growing up, but of getting out of the house and figuring out what to do. But like, I feel like we just, why are we so compelled to just kind of go with it? We were, though. Like, I was a true believer of the Brian Jonestown Massacre. Like, Ondi and I always loved music, right? And when I heard their music, I was really like, I was like, this is an incredible band, and I want the world to know about this band, more so at first than the Dandies. I grew to like the Dandies a lot too, but like the Brian Jonestown Massacre was like an instant Velvet Underground, early Stones, like this band's incredible. These people are amazing. So I was kind of like joined the crew. And then over the course of making the film, there was a lot of sort of like scary disillusionment, but and then it was a great documentary by that point, right?
I have some fun anecdotes around this question. It's a great question. I mean, first of all, David and I, both we became filmmakers when we were at Yale University as students, and Yale had no production facilities. So we taught ourselves in a public access station where if you edited something, you had to change everything after it. Like it was like
linear, before Avid. So
before nonlinear editing. So it was like, it was very like when we went into documentary, there was no career in documentary. It was like a very strange thing that like no one understood what we even meant by that when we were graduating college. And we had made a film about a woman in prison who was railroaded in due to like our racist justice system and just a lot of it's like a crazy story called The Nature of the Beast. And we came out to LA to try to turn that into something that would reach millions of people that would write letters to get her out, because nobody, even though it went on PBS, nobody was watching documentaries back then. This is like mid 90s. And so we came out here, and that's why we started looking at art and commerce, because we were like, as soon as we were trying to make this thing into something that was like a scripted movie of the week or whatever, it got distorted. And we were like, wait, are we going to be able to reach our any kind of mainstream audience or mass audience while maintaining the integrity of our work? And this is ironic because we started looking at bands to look at whether they could maintain their integrity, almost like kind of looking at what would happen to us. And we were so dedicated to the actual question and the search that it was much less about like the commercial success of it for us, I feel like. And when we would go in, we would shoot so much because one of our thoughts was, what if we could shoot life as it's unfolding so that we could kind of recreate the serendipity for people and really take people on that ride? Then we would have a suspense-driven narrative that was real. And like that was unheard of back then.
Yeah, this is before reality TV.
It was even
like real world only.
It was like the real world. You had come out, and I was like, "Oh my god, the real world!" And I was like, "We could just make that like this."
Yeah, we thought like this will prove that true life is more interesting than fiction if we can actually do this, So we filmed way too much. Now, 30 years into this, I can do the same thing and film a lot less because I know what elements to get to make it all like that. But we were like, we're gonna do it this way, that's why we shot so much material. And we would go into the tape store on La Brea and they would be like, do you guys buy groceries? Because we were like buying tapes by the mass and we were so skinny. And we were just like buying tapes. It was insane. So then suddenly 4 years, like a few years go by and we're like, well, we should edit this. This is the most amazing story. Like, this is crazy. We've just shot insane stuff. And it's like, oh my God, we've shot thousands of hours of footage and it's going to take years to edit this.
Yeah.
So, but then we ended up getting like, neither band was sound scanning anything. Like there was no way to get funding that way. So we just made an EPK, like a sales reel for the Dandy Warhols. And we were literally going out on that tour that you see in the movie, and David's pager went off from Capitol Records, Liz Heller at Capitol Records, offering to buy it for $6,000, the EPK. And that was literally our first sale. And then we just started making EPKs and music videos to fund Dig over the next couple of years.
Yeah, there are little chunks in Dig, a few little chunks that were pieces of EPKs. Like, and
we would take up, and we would like when the Brian Jonestown got signed, we took all our footage and we licensed it to them as going to hell music video. Like we would just pay for it along the way that way. But we wanted to get an investor, so we finally got Kerry Woods interested. And this is like the punchline of my story. It was during the Anton's like wear white and come when I call phase, as we call it. And Kerry Woods, he had produced like Gummo,
Kids.
Okay.
And he was like, you guys are sitting on a pile of gold. It's an amazing project. He wanted to meet Anton, and Anton showed up with like 7 women dressed in white and threatened his life. And so that was it. And he's like, I can't lose my life over this project, but good luck. And there we were, back to square one. So, I mean, the good news is we took it to Sundance and sold it and all that. But it was not, we were in a tight spot finishing Dig.
It is like, when you look at actually how they got signed, it is a miracle. I mean, I don't know if this is in the film. And
where they
I see a question on here that says, were there any crazy lead scenes that didn't make the cut? Like, still my favorite story from Dig is Michael Dutcher, then their manager, showing up. Basically, Anton was in no state to like close the deal because he was the Kerry Woods thing happened and wear white, come when I call. So he shows up with a laminating machine, a Polaroid camera, and he just takes a picture of Joel and makes a fake ID of Joel.
I think it's in the movie.
Is it in the movie?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about the fake ID, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know. I feel like
he flew to New York on a fake ID.
That Joel went as Anton, but the actual fake ID making at like 7 a.m. after we pulled an all-nighter, making this thing. We just like stayed up all night long, thanks to Joel. And then they made that fake ID, and of course it's pre 9/11, so you could like fly across the country on like some
fake ID,
like, laminated plastic that says like engaged booking Joel. Anton with Joel.
Anton, it said Anton, but it was Joel's picture, and he flew to New York and did the deal, so that they didn't see that Anton was wildly addicted to heroin at that point.
So I'm dying to know about
part of the team. I mean, we were like on their side, really wanted to see them get signed, like really big fans of the band at this point, but we've been through it. I mean, we, that whole Chicago scene, that was real, I mean, they disappeared into the night and we didn't know how to find Matt, and it was like, we couldn't go on, we're stuck in Chicago. We couldn't go anywhere. We ended up at like David's friend's house in Cleveland or something?
In Columbus. Scott Pike. I apologize. So
you had to apologize.
I showed him my college roommate's house, and he's got like, he's got this lovely house with like, antiques, and here we bring the Jonestown Massacre, and then, I think they broke a few things. And he like was like, "Oh, you're coming! I'll make dinner for everybody." I was like, "It's fine."
These guys don't eat dinner. They haven't had dinner in 6 months.
But I'm dying to know, like, okay, so you're filming this for years. Just like, tell us what this is like. I mean, is this every day? Is it you're checking up with them every few months, and you're meanwhile working jobs? Like, what is happening?
Varied. It started off, it was pretty much every day.
It was all the time. They moved in, even like when Anton said he wrote, when he came back and said he was in prison with Charles Manson, that they had collaborated. He stayed at our house. Courtney broke up with his girlfriend and like moved into my bed like little best friendsies and like hung out there for a month. We were like we were very much the home base for both bands for a while, it seemed like. And then around the time that we realized how much footage we shot, then we started editing. And I think at that point we started dropping in like upon occasion, right? It would be like every month or two.
Well, and also once it sort of got gnarly, like it didn't, once they got signed and the drugs got pretty bad, it wasn't like a place we wanted to hang out. And they got their own house then.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this. It was, it was a little more of a job then, I think. But also I had like a day job too. Even like the sitar time I had it. I just remember you calling me at my day job. It'd be like, you have to come home now. They're in our backyard with the sitar.
Yeah. At some point in there, like, well, actually what happened is David had a baby. He's now graduating college, and that kind of took him out of the game. Like he was like, I have to actually.
I moved to Portland
now.
The Dandies helped me move to Portland. I mean,
he drove up to Portland, and they ended up moving to Portland because he ran. The Dandies were like outside playing basketball or something, right?
Yeah, I just like I was just there, and they were just like, "Hey, what's up?" Hey, it's like so it was cool. They threw us like a baby shower. It was really cool.
Yeah, and then what prompted the finishing of the film was I got pregnant, and then I had a baby due. And I was like, I cannot bring this rock saga into motherhood. Like, I don't even know how to be a mom. And I can't have Anton screaming through an Avid, like, I have to finish this, So that was how I had and that when I won Sundance, I thanked him for the deadline I couldn't push. My 11-week-old baby.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So, because I was going to ask that. I mean, I imagine that much time filming, you could have fashioned an ending any number of times along the way, I imagine. I was wondering how you decided, okay, the story's over here. There's a full arc. We can shape this into a movie. Sounds like the answer was I need to go lead a normal life and stop following these maniacs around.
Actually, it was the Knitting Factory.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. But I remember, like, I remember being on the receiving end of a couple phone calls. Oh my God, I think I shot the ending. Oh my God, I think I shot the ending. But definitely the Knitting Factory was the ending. But also prior to that, like having the bands going to Europe, going to Tokyo with them, like there were these sort of touchstone. When the Jonestown went to Tokyo, like we just went with them for that. We weren't shooting them every day up until then. And when they went to London, it's like we did a couple of European trips. So we sort of spacing it out. But definitely that Knitting Factory show, you called me and you're like, okay, I shot the ending.
Yeah, I think actually you're right. Like we knew we had to go to Europe because Bohemian, like you, got picked up as a Vodafone commercial, and that blew the Dandies up. So that was the moment we were waiting for, where the two bands, like, really had this separation, and suddenly the Dandies really did have the microphone to the world, and that was really important. The third producer here, Vasco Nunes, who passed away, he and I flew there, and he's also was a DP, and he shot a lot of 16 millimeter, and like we were able to like up the game, even 35 millimeter, to kind of elevate that part of it and say, okay, well, these guys have made it,
Yeah.
And so I was like, David, I think we have an ending. And then Anton, started, the fruit got thrown at Anton at the Troubadour, and
right.
Jeff Davies
thought that was going to be
microphone, and that seemed like an ending. And then I was, editing, and I did that final interview with Anton while I was pregnant, where he's like, the bean counters, the end of the movie, that interview, when I was very pregnant. And then the Knitting Factory happened. And that was an unbelievable moment where it all kind of came to this thing where he was finally arrested, like he had gone too far. And to me, that felt like a really solid ending. So I think there were people that saw it and said, well, you have a few endings here. But we didn't cut any of those endings because they're all kind of amazing chapters in and of themselves,
Yeah. Oh, and one thing about that progression, though, that's interesting with the film is, like, when we started the film, we were not professionals. I mean, we were like semi-pro, we had like semi-pro gear, and like we were semi-pro skills. And so you definitely like can see the quality of the shooting sort of getting better. And then by the end, when you're like shooting 16 in a giant festival, and it was good. It was good that we kind of like figured it out by the time you got to England and the big festival with the dandies, you know?
Yeah, I think, you know, you can see a lot of vignetting and crazy zoom and things like that I was just super into at the time because I was like 23, you know?
Well, no, it was a mini DV camera with a really it was like prosumer, and it didn't have a wide angle lens. So we had that screw on.
Yeah. If we zoomed out, it should put a circle.
When you zoomed out, you got a big vignette. I mean,
but what I think is so perfect about that is that it has this DIY feeling to it. That is what the whole movie is, you know? And so actually in the coloring and like finishing process, we had to kind of put some of the cleaner footage into like a wash. And any stuff we shot later that was a little bit nicer, we had to like dumb it down to go into the earlier parts of the movie. It was interesting. We had to do like a reverse effect on it to make it feel like this, like it meshed together, you know?
Yeah.
It's almost like throw it all in a washing machine.
It's interesting because that festival footage, I actually thought that maybe you guys had licensed that from MTV or something, because it is visually distinct from the rest of the footage, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, how did you make the decision to have Courtney be the narrator?
Oh, so I was very troubled, and sorry to talk about being pregnant again, but I was like, I don't know what to do, and you know, when you're that far along in a pregnancy, you don't sleep very well. So I was up at like 3 a.m, like, I have got to figure out a way to tie this together, but I don't want to burst the bubble of the movie, the narrative. You know, I don't want some other omniscient person, but it's just not quite cutting it. I used to be such a fan of like no narration. I was a big, solid, like pure verite, like no narration, you know, Frederick Weissman style, and you know, or D.A. Pennybaker or something. And I was really
Don't Look Back, Harlan County.
Yeah, I was excited to go with like straight fly on the wall. But then I realized like Courtney had become famous, and he did have the ear of the world in a way that Anton never did. And he would regard Anton as this little creature that he loved and he emulated in a weird way, but that he kept in a little box, you know? And I thought this would be perfect if Courtney narrated it. It was like I woke up at like, or was just sleepless at 3 a.m. It was like definitely in the middle of the night. And I know that because I immediately contacted Courtney because I knew he was in Europe and it was later. So I called him in the middle of the night and he was like, oh yeah, sure. I'll be in LA next week. Like that would be awesome. And he came and I had written parts for him and he adjusted some of them to like be more like him. And we recorded the voiceover right there in Rob Campanella's studio.
Still the band.
Jonestown at the time. And then, yeah, when the movie came out, and this is kind of a fun part of it, is Courtney was so into it that he took out the Paramount Theater in Portland and had like a premiere party and showed the movie there. And then it was like 5 years later, I think, when I heard that Courtney Taylor, he had added like a second last name.
Yeah.
And that he had like was against the film, like he'd come out against the film. And I was like, how do you do the narration and like throw a premiere party and then come out against the film?
Well, the tone of his narration is just so perfect. I mean, it's like that he has that like that separation. He's engaged. You know, there's like a little bit of irony. I mean, it's like you couldn't have cast anybody better.
Yeah, no, there was no way. There was no one else to do it. I was so relieved when he was excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we thought of you doing the narration, and it was like it wasn't. Did we go out for a second? We were like, no, it's not going to work. But it was perfect.
With my movie, We Live in Public, that was the same thing. That everybody was like, you should do the narration. I was like, no. And I resisted, and finally I ended up doing it. This is the only movie I've ever narrated. We'll stop it at that.
So on the front of Courtney sort of distancing himself from the movie, we talked about this on the episode when we talked about the show. I searched high and low, and I can't find any specific complaint they have or that they've verbalized or any sort of specific allegation about it being dishonest in any way. They sort of vaguely hand wave that, well, hey, there's 2,500 hours of footage. You could take 2,500 hours of footage of my retired mom and make her look however you would want, which sure. Let's let the philosophers chew on that one. But are you aware of anything that they have specifically criticized or complained about? And did they ever bring any of this stuff up with you guys?
I think I know that the last time I've seen either of them, either of the frontmen, was at a Brian Jonestown show on Mother's Day. And it's really ironic because they usually play here around Mother's Day, which is this weekend. And they also, people always get in touch with me, and they always invite me to come. Like, everybody always wants to go to the Brian Jonestown with me. And I've done it twice, and I'm just like bored because I spent so much time with that music and with them. And like, I'm used to being able to be up close. It's not like they, I think Anton's a brilliant musician for sure. I love the band, but it's just it's not for me. So now I turn it down. But the last time I went, we went backstage, and Anton was like right behind me, and he's like, says to somebody, Ondi and I don't talk anymore. So that I could, and I didn't fall for that. And then I was like, hey, Courtney, how are you? This is the part that surprised me. And he was like, I'm okay, living off the past, and like turned his back to me. And I said to his manager, his then manager, what's going on? What's his problem? And he said, I tried to explain to him that Dig's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you're playing the will turn when you haven't had a hit record in a while. And, anytime they wanted to play Dig songs, they would just, anytime they want the audience to like they'll play a song from Dig, on the one hand, you're playing these shows, because I think they were playing like Dandy's and then Brian Jonestown the next night or something. Maybe they were playing the same night. I can't remember exactly.
No, they weren't playing the same night, but they were very close to each other a few years ago. I remember that.
Yeah. So he's like, you're getting to play these gigs for 5,000 people, and you're still like making money all over the world from this. But at the same time, you're frozen in time, and I think when Courtney was excited and it was adorable when he's in his blue underwear in Europe, I always think about him jumping around being like, Madrid, we love it. Paris, we love it. Like he was so excited to be living the dream, and it's tangible and it's beautiful and it's sweet, but he regarded himself as, I think, and does regard himself as this kind of more mystique, more like he wanted to be Mick Jagger, but under a veil of smoke, and like sort of like when they play Godless or something, and they stand very firm and they do their guitar like this.
Remember
like that's kind of like you see the movie.
Remember when we said to him we wanted to interview his parents, and he was like, rock stars don't have parents. So I think that sums it up. Like, so, and I think Dig now is like their, high school, math teacher or something, whatever, like their high school band, like it's a
really hard to be frozen in time like that. Like I can't imagine what that must be like if you're trying to progress with your career. And also at the same time, it gives them career security, and it gives them a wonderful, cultural touchstone to be part of, I think, for the rest of their lives. It does freeze them in time. So
yeah, the movie is more famous than either band, probably, I would say.
Yeah, I imagine so. But a lot of the bands are famous from the movie, and they've gotten a lot of, like Anton had the opening song of Boardwalk Empire and spoofed on the Gilmore Girl. The Dig, like they did the Viper Room scene line by line on the
on Gilmore Girls. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's pretty. I only know because my daughter's big girl. She's seen the seasons like 4 times over, but it's hilarious. And Joel's in it.
And Joel's in it. Yeah, we did not and Courtney was in Veronica Mars as well. We did not mention.
They did the song for Veronica Mars, right?
Right.
Yeah. A lot of Hollywood discovered the bands through the movie. And that's awesome. Like they get to, have that forever. But I do think that's the issue.
It's a double-edged sword. Interesting.
It is. Yeah.
Because let me in on this. Is any part of Anton's thing a bit? Is there any percent of what he's doing? No, that's
no. I think he's got, no, I don't think so. It's not a conscious bit. I don't think he can control it. I don't think he can control it.
No, even standing on the side of the stage, he stands out of the center. He stands in the shadows. He has not, that's how he is. If you talk to him up close, he's going to get really close. Like if you have a hat on, he'll get under the brim of the hat.
Yeah.
Is like, that's just him,
I think
that's
just
like
I just
about him, is that he is. What's so refreshing about him is that he's so authentic,
He's really real. And like, I just had this little exchange on Twitter with him, and like, I'm not surprised. And I guess 20 years ago I would have been like hurt because I would 20 years ago I was like, oh my gosh, I love this band so much. And so it hurt me the first few times I got like the real Anton rage, but now I'm just like, that's Anton. Yeah, I'm not, and it's not a bit, it's just how he responds. You know, it's like what Sarah Tuchek says. He's like a shark, you know, it's like keeps moving and it's got to.
Yeah, then he has to swim against the current to survive. You know, because when we played the movie for him, he laughed throughout the whole movie and had no changes. That's the thing, is like we ran it by both of them and they both absolutely loved it. You know, and then as soon as it came out, he's like, you know, the first thing, I didn't even realize he was against it until I read some terrible line. Like he would, you know, if me and my family got in an accident, he would raise his glass to the heavens and say hallelujah or something. I was like, it was so nasty. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I didn't even have any idea. And then I remember we were having our New York premiere at Lincoln Center, and one of his ex-girlfriends was there. And she's like, do you understand? He can't support this film. Like, if he supported the film, he wouldn't be a cult hero. He wouldn't, you know, he can't do that.
Right.
I don't even think it's calculated. I think he just has to be against it. I don't know. Maybe that part is calculated a little bit. I think he secretly likes the film, because if you watch over the years, if you look at the Brian Jonestown feed or whatever, like they do promote the film sometimes. Which is interesting, because that's the other issue the Dandies have, is that Anton, and they even say it themselves, comes off as the genius, right? The authentic genius, and they come off as the band that sold out. But we didn't intend for that. Like, I don't think they come off as the band that sold out. They come off as normal human beings who are actually making a living and a career, you know?
A lot less functional.
Yeah. And the way that Courtney tirades against the record labels in New York in the movie, I think it's very clear that the Dandies are still a band that, you know, holds to their center in a way that most bands might not.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, and even his reaction to La Chapelle, which at the time you can read it as going, "Oh my gosh, Courtney's such a pop star," and whatever La Chapelle calls him, but like, vain and all that stuff. But at the same time, like, you know, they were reacting to, holy crap, we suddenly were in the middle of this David LaChapelle circus, and this maybe wasn't our thing. You know, maybe we made a mistake asking him to make our video, and like, you kind of have to respect that, you know, Courtney for standing up and not just getting rolled by, you know.
Yeah, there's this one moment where Courtney and Anton talk. It's really maybe the most revealing moment in the movie to me, where they're talking, and it's like all the rock star stuff is past, and it's just two pals talking. And it's when Courtney tells Anton, well, look, no one in the record industry notices that you made 3 records last year. They recognize that you punched Joel in the face on stage at the Viper Room. And Anton like actually hears it, and he like takes it in and thinks about it for a second. He doesn't say, well, you know, fuck you, you're making a music video with La Chapelle, you know. And so I don't know, like, how often did you have moments like that where it was like pulled out of the Anton show, pulled out of the insanity of the Brian Jonestown Massacre, and you just saw 2, you know, people talking, or Anton just being a person?
I mean, Anton is so mercurial, because you could get him, like, sometimes he would show up and he would just be like so chilled out and very thoughtful and very calm. It's like, I don't know if it was a manic depressive thing. I think it probably was, but like, you'd get him. Yeah, you'd get seasonal. Exactly. You'd get him. And then other times he was raving. So there was plenty of like lucid, thoughtful Anton. And I think we have a fair amount of that in the film. And that's what was so hard, because you meet that Anton and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, this is the sensitive artist behind all the beautiful music. And then you get the rage, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I felt like I related. Like, I found Anton to be he was almost a role model for me for a while there. Like, early on, we went to South by Southwest together. They played some gigs, and we rode in the car, and I have these DAT recordings of he and I just talking for hours, you know, and it's like, really, I haven't listened back ever, but I remember that it was just really beautiful relationship between 2 artists who really respected each other, and were married to their work. Like, he was the first guy that I had filmed, who, you know, was like, and he says it in a really hard way for me to understand back then. And it seems really cold and it seems really weird when he says, like, there's been 100 members of this band. I am the Brian Jonestown Massacre. Like, he really means that. We probably did film about 100 members of the band by the time we were done. Like, there were so many people that moved in and out of that band, but he was the Brian Jonestown. He was just like, he was so dedicated to the craft of making music. And for that, I had so much respect for him, you know? And that was one thing about the film that is adjusted for narrative sake, for the sake of a movie, is that we did have to stick with pretty much the same lineup. Because if we portrayed all those lineups, and it's a shame for some of the later members that aren't in the film, and they, you know, deserve the respect of knowing that they were in the Brian Jonestown. But if we played it like that, there were too many members over all that time for you to possibly get to know as an audience. And then Courtney also, like, I really respected Courtney. And to me, they both were people who were like, I looked up to, you know, a lot of the time. But I don't think we filmed the two of them having a lot of quiet conversations besides what you see, because Courtney did hold Anton at a distance. And then Anton got very upset, you know, when that happened, when he was at that suburbia lockout space. He got really upset at having been shafted by the Dandies. And that's when the antagonistic relationship started. He had so much resentment that whenever he did hang out with them for a period of time, it would go south really fast. Then also when they did the photo shoot, like sometime
in their house.
That was it. After that, it was like these guys, like, they were totally enemies at that point, you know? But Joel is the one who I wish this film launched his career as a comedian, because he's
that's a great Patreon page. Everyone should subscribe, because he's been writing from the tour, and he actually has been writing all these memories from you know, his 20 plus years in the band, and it's really good. So look on Patreon. I don't know how to say Patreon, and subscribe to Joel's stuff, because it's very funny. It's very like gonzo journalist, you know, style writing. It's good. Yeah,
that's where I wanted to go. Was, I mean, you know, we've talked about Anton and Courtney, you know, the two leading, you know, stars. But if you were casting a movie, you could not get a better, you know, co-star or a third person than Joel. I mean, he is just doing so much shtick the entire time. I mean, it's and
legal drugs and cigarettes.
Yeah, he's hilarious and charming, and just like, just that great, you know, jester, whatever you want to call it. I am kind of curious what he is really like, because I mean, even I saw the Brian Jonestown Massacre a week ago playing, and you know, a lot of you walk through the crowd and people are saying like, hey, what's with the guy who's just hanging out and playing the tambourine? You know, I mean, he must have heard that for the last 25 years and he's cool with it. But what do you think he brings to the table creatively, and also what, you know, give us a little insight into that guy.
He's like the spirit animal of the band. I mean, he's like he's the jester, and he's also like very intentionally the front man. Like Anton stands beside, he stands in the middle. He's the front man tambourine player. It's like I mean, he's I don't know. He's beautiful. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he always was. It was always a pleasure to work with him. You know, he was always very professional. He was always like, he always had compassion for us as the film crew. You know, he'd always sit aside and be like, things are going crazy right now. Sorry about this, guys. You know, like he was the one who had like eyes to everyone. And, you know, he's a brilliant artist in his own right. And he's a great writer. He just has an even when he's sitting there in the hotel, and they've had this huge fight that, you know, Anton had been and I were both in jail, and like we got out of jail and they missed the gig in Atlanta. And he's like, he realizes that when he hits the table, the phone does this ding ding. So, you know, like he just goes bam, bam, and it rings. He's like, sorry, can't come to the phone right now because I ruined my whole life and I've wasted everything. You know, I mean, he's just like a spontaneous.
He's a comic genius. He's an improv, and his improv, it's all improv. You know, all of that. Like, cameras on him, and he's just like, going into Love's country store and like filling up the drinks and just like rolling with whatever. He's like he's kind of like a Zen improv comic genius.
Yeah, we have the 20th anniversary of Dig coming up in a couple of years, and we're just thinking about like, well, what should we do to commemorate it? And there's definitely something we want to cook up with Joel, because so much of his comedy, like, it was too early back then when Dig was really a hit sensation coming out of Sundance. I took a lot of meetings with different networks, and they were like, well, what do you want to do next? And I said, well, I'd love to turn Dig into a series because I just have so much footage. You know, it's really, and we mapped out something like 32 episodes or something. And a lot of his stunts that he pulls, they couldn't make the movie and they could make the series, you know, but still trying to figure out what to do with that stuff. Like, I don't know if you remember, David, when they came back from some tour or something and the whole kitchen was like, ants were everywhere because they left tanks everywhere.
Yeah.
God, they made such a funny bit out of that. You know, I remember, but I don't think it's in the movie. Is it?
I don't think it's in the movie. No. But there's somebody. Yeah, I need to see that footage. We need to get back into the footage. Hope it exists. Hope it hasn't like turned into dust.
I know.
Well, I mean, one of the things we wanted to ask, which is kind of jumping ahead, is like, is there any discussion of like, doing, you know, nowadays what we have is like the Kanye documentary, Get Back, you know, like you're not restricted to a feature length. Is there any interest or discussion of taking, you know, the footage and doing whether you call it a director's cut or an expanded edition, or looking back, bringing people back in? Is there any conversation about that?
We've talked about it.
We've talked about it. We have we had this 5-hour cut that I was like, I can't cut anything else from this film. Like, this is it. It has to be like, you know. And I was so pregnant, and I was like, and then we cut it to 3 hours and 40 minutes, and then we cut it to the feature that you see. So there is this like Shoah of rock version, but getting it back online has proved very challenging. I think only like half of it is back online because so many of the tapes were like too old to read back then, or, you know, so it really requires David Tagger. He's the editing god who can come and help us. But it is a bit of a bee's nest, I have to admit. I think whatever is there, and then do something like what you're suggesting, where we talk around it and we bring Joel back, and, you know, do something like that. We'll do something. We'll figure something out.
I mean, if that 5-hour cut came out today, Andy and I would like tell our wives, like, take the kids, cancel our plans. We're out of here.
I'm going to need at least 15 hours to watch this 3 times end to end.
Yeah, I used to do that. If I had a quarter for every time people watched the movie, I'd have a lot of money. People I know have been like, the only movie I stole from the video store. I watched it 17 times. I'm like, okay.
Well, I did want to, Andy, I'll let you jump in, but I do want to ask, like, you know, you have this movie that's been, you know, successful and still in the discussion, not 18, 20 years later, without getting into the details. I mean, is there revenue there? You know, for people that are interested in documentaries, is that just a thing that came and went, or are you getting, you know, are you getting a $3 royalty check? What happens?
There's revenue now if you make documentaries, Andy. Yes,
there's a huge documentary business.
Yeah.
But this is considered like a classic documentary, and I don't know if this is going to change. I did talk to a top executive at Netflix the other night, last weekend, because both Dig and We Live in Public, you know, are Sundance Grand Jury Prize winning films in the Museum of Modern Art, and neither is on Netflix, and neither is streamable on Amazon because Donald Trump, apparently, like, there were so many people that put out like false documents on Amazon over the pandemic that they had to like change their policy. So it has to come from like a major distributor now. And since we have the rights to both of those films, we can't, like, as of now, neither is on either streamer. They're both on this website. And it's absurd. And I was just talking the other night with the guy at Netflix, and then I was talking with a few other filmmakers who have the same situation where they have classic films that are not viewable on streamers because the streamers are all trying to be television networks, right? They're all trying to like come out with new content. And now all their stock is tanking. They might refigure and reconfigure it because it doesn't make any sense. There's like, they should be available. it doesn't cost them that much to make them available. It's not like we're going to charge a lot. You know what I mean? It's just like, let's make it available for the people. So we'll see what happens. He told me to write him, and I'm just remembering that during this podcast. So I'll write him.
Make a note.
Yeah.
No,
Well, also
now no revenue from no like serious revenue coming in from Dig. So
gotcha.
Yeah. But
we'll
it's
change that, people.
It's like great history, and we want to put it out there. You know, we want to make sure that the fans have something else, and we mark the 20th anniversary.
Well, and I want to preserve that stuff. I just want to like digitize that stuff because I'm like, I looked back at some stuff when we were trying to digitize it recently, and there was like, it was kind of scary. And I was like, is it the deck that's broken? Because the problem is, it's like all of that stuff was shot, most of it, a lot of it was shot like before digital, so everything's sort of analog and falling apart and been sitting in storage, and it's a little bit terrifying.
Let's get Martin Scorsese or the Criterion Collection or somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
Preserve this stuff.
Go
AFI, somebody
fix it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Good call to action there, David.
I'm calling Martin Scorsese right after this. We'll get him right.
Excellent.
Well, so you mentioned the sort of streaming wars, and things aren't looking great for them right now, but let's pretend we're having this conversation 10 days ago when things maybe weren't tanking quite so bad for all the streamers. David and I mention often that there's sort of a rock doc industrial complex now. You've got these big event like documentaries for different musicians dropping all the time. Do you guys take big swings throughout your career? All the projects you do are very involved and very deliberate and considered. Have you thought of getting back into doing another music project anytime recently? Would you want to?
I think on my current, like, I always have a ton of stuff going on, and none of it is music, I don't think, right now. For me, the story is always the most important thing. And I feel like a lot of the music films that I've been seeing, and I haven't seen some of them, but, people have commented like, oh man, something like Dig just couldn't happen today because people are so media savvy, and all of these artists now have like all of these approval over everything. And we did let the bands see the finished thing beforehand. And we almost went down a terrible road where MTV would have put out Dig as a series when we were making it. And that would have, thank God that didn't happen. There were too many cigarettes and curse words for them ultimately.
Too many cigarettes. They're like too many little
cigarettes. We did make a pilot for them, which helped us financially for a minute to edit some material, But yeah, I think that overall, it's not, I don't think it's the same world. There's this new thing that it's an insider term, but it's called flash doc. And it's this idea of, let's make something, let's make it a puff piece a little bit. You know what I mean? And then the artist will be behind it. They could do a live show. Amazon especially loves that model because it ties in with all their music stuff, and they can sell all the records behind it and everything. So but I'm not really interested in doing anything like that, but I think if the opportunity presents itself for something that, again, is going to like make people question, is going to make people inspire people. I mean, so many people started bands and became filmmakers and artists because of Dig. Like, if there's an opportunity like that again to do something meaningful, of course I will, Yeah.
Talking about the new media and the new media landscape, I just wanted to point out something that came to my mind is like how like prescient Anton was this whole like, I'm giving it all away for free. There's that, there is no more record industry. When we started Dig, there was a record industry, and they were like butting their head against it. And now like, everybody gives it away for free. So that was interesting.
Yeah. And another thing I'll mention is that music is extremely important to our work, both of us. I mean, we're both, I think that experience certainly shaped us as artists. And, I was a musician, not great, but I always played music, and I'm a music editor. Like, I edit musically, and music, what I put in each movie is so important to me. So it's very helpful, I think, both that we edit and that we have this musical background, and editing those 7 years with those bands was like great training for life,
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on an hour, so we wanted to thank you guys for being so open. I mean, we had, you guys answered by far everything we were going to ask, and beyond. So, we really appreciate that. And we want to thank you guys for making a classic that we love, and that's meant a lot to both of us. And this part of this crazy, weird project we're doing as well. Anything else you guys want to share? Anything you want to plug? Talk about something you've got coming up?
That band that we couldn't think of was Tegan and Sarah.
Oh,
that's right.
Oh, that's big.
There you go.
Yeah. So they were a band that we collaborated with early on.
Very cool.
Yeah, who my fiance has also collaborated with. So that was cool. So I secretly texted her and while we were talking. And behind me you'll see David Bowie, who reminds me every day that I can change and transform and never have to be the same. And I will say that I did have the privilege of seeing the Bowie film that Brett Morgan, who's a dear friend of mine, is putting out this year, and that is a great film. In speaking of rock docs, I would.
Yeah, we're excited about that.
Great film. I wanted to basically move into the film and just make a little house and live inside the film. You'll see
the Velvet Underground one.
Oh yeah,
Velvet Underground was great. Yeah. Todd Haynes did a great job with that film.
Yeah.
That was a really good film. Sparks Brothers was great too. Edgar Wright.
Yeah, I love Sparks Brothers. We spoke to Christine Vachon, the producer of the Velvet Underground, who works with Todd Haynes for so many years. She was great as well. Yeah, the Sparks, they're really good ones. And Andy and I have unconditional love for the the whole rock doc thing. They all have their virtues, but yeah, I do think there are people doing great work. Anything you guys want to talk about that's coming out, or you want people to check out, or anything to plug?
I mean, we have a movie that we are both in that's about our father that I made that is coming out in the fall, and it's called Last Flight Home. It premiered at Sundance this year, and MTV Docs acquired it. So MTV Documentary Films, which is very different than MTV the network, but they do theatrical, and they are putting it. Yeah, it'll be opening in several cities. It'll be a limited theatrical release in September. And it's about the last days of our father's life and sort of about how to live and how to die. And so it's not very much related to Dig, but it is related in that it's verite. It's very real, and it's sort of, you're right there in the room, So, so keep an eye out for that. And I think that's all that I want. I have a new movie that we're just finishing right now. There's a test screening tonight. David's coming over. And that's called The New Americans. And that's sort of more of a follow-up to We Live in Public than
great.
Yeah.
Can we sneak in one final question before we let you go?
Sure.
We had a viewer, Zach from Vienna, who asked if you guys were able to capture any of the Dandy's friendship with David Bowie on camera. I'm not even really familiar with that.
I heard they play. I mean, I think I heard and maybe saw video of them performing with him when they toured with him. They opened for him and they played White Light, White Heat together. But I don't think I was around for any of it. You know, Andy?
No.
You would have remembered.
I didn't really know that.
Gotta look for that. All right. Well, thank you guys again so much. Thanks for everybody who was watching along and those who are listening to the podcast, of course. Ondi Timoner, David Timoner, thanks. We'll be looking for what you guys have coming up. And that's it. Rock Docs. We did it.